Iran and Britain have agreed to raise their diplomatic relations to the ambassador level and exchange envoys for the first time since bilateral ties soured in 2011. Iran's new ambassador to London, Hamid Baeidinejad, is a former nuclear negotiator who also served as the head of Foreign Ministry's Political and International Affairs Department. He presented his credentials to British Secretary of State Boris Johnson in London. Britain appointed the current Chargé d'Affaires in Tehran, Nicholas Hopton, as its Iran ambassador. Informed sources say the latest development comes after Tehran agreed with London's request to upgrade ties. Britain shut down its embassy in Tehran in November 2011 and withdrew its diplomatic staff after hundreds of Iranian students, angry at London's anti-Iran policy, stormed the British embassy in Tehran. They were angry at the expansion of London's sanctions on the Islamic Republic and pulled down the UK flag. In response to the incident, Britain closed its embassy and also ordered the closure of the Iranian Embassy in London. Let's speak to Tony Gosling. He's an investigative journalist and he joins us via Skype from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, many thanks for joining us here on Press TV. Now, what do you make of this upgrading of ties between Iran and Britain?
Fantastic news. Just last year we had the embassy. This year now we've got the flights, direct flights from London, British Airways flights to Tehran now. And Nicholas Hopton, who, by the way, has just come hot foot from Qatar and from Yemen, as in the Middle East too. So he is really seeing kind of both sides on the Gulf Cooperation Council and in Yemen of some of the worst of the conflict. So he seems like a very good guy for Boris Johnson to appoint formally to this job. But I mean, there's a lesson for all of us here, isn't there, that we've really got to try and keep these diplomatic channels open always as much as we possibly can. I think that goes to be said from the Iranian and from the British side. And just as the British police, I hope, would protect the Iranian embassy, we need to make sure that our forces, don't allow demonstrators to get into embassies and this kind of thing, which is what happened. These diplomatic ties are really important to keep open. But it's quite clear that the United States and Britain are still trying to lecture Iran on how to conduct Middle East policy, which seems quite incredible, really. I mean, what is the acceptable face of Islam? We've really got to make this decision. There seems to be a bit of a schizophrenia here, saying the Iranians are terrible people, no good, and also criticising ISIS while secretly supporting the supply lines to ISIS, mainly through Turkey. So we need to just have a proper look at this, and let's hope that Nicholas Hopton is able to do that.
Right now, Mr. Gosling, of course, this is coming obviously right after the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear agreement between Iran and the P5+1. We're also seeing at the same time certain cracks where the U.S. is being accused of not fulfilling its side of the bargain. But when you look at Iran's relationship with the other members of this P5+1 group, what do you make of that? What trajectory do you think it's going to take?
Well, look, it's always going to be a bit difficult, this, because Britain is effectively a kind of satellite state of the United States. Having said that, we've just had the Brexit vote here, and there's a kind of newfound sense of independence that maybe Britain can have an independent foreign policy. And I don't want to go too far back in history, but we really do have to look right the way back till 1945, the 11th of February, where President Roosevelt was over at the Bitter Lake on the Suez Canal, meeting with King Abdulaziz. At that point, there was a new kind of colonial power moved in from the British were out the way, the Americans were moving in at the end of the Second World War, and those agreements which were made then between Roosevelt and Saudi Arabia are one of the major problems that we've still got today to deal with, because the Saudi Arabia, ISIS, the Sham Liberation Front, Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, these are effectively fanatics conducting war crimes. We all know about ISIS, but what about the war crimes that the Saudis are now conducting inside Yemen? So these differences in Islam and these kind of, I would say, kind of almost a puritanical version, fanatical version, which the Americans have encouraged since World War II. Britain is now, I think, confident enough to step sideways a little bit and have a different policy to the United States, which is a very good thing.
And before I let you go, Mr. Gosling, when it comes to embassies in Iran, let's not forget there is a history to it where we've seen, particularly the U.S., use its embassy to basically as a more of an espionage location, so to speak. And it was the same feeling that many got when the British embassy was stormed in 2011. What's to say this will not be repeated?
Well, look, all embassies, I'm afraid, do a bit of espionage. But what you need to do in these sorts of circumstances is you need to pin down specific individuals in that embassy, maybe military attaches or whoever, who are doing the espionage, and actually maybe just prosecute them as individuals. They can't be allowed to do espionage under diplomatic immunity protection. So that's the cover that they often use. And I think it's really good for all countries to do this. If you think that someone is doing specific espionage through diplomatic channels, not necessarily through the courts, say, right, either this person's got to leave, this individual's got to leave, or else they're going to be prosecuted and arrested under our own laws. That's the best way to deal with it, not by demonising an entire embassy. And then what you're doing is you're patting on the back the honest diplomats, and that's what we need to see to increase peace and good relations around the world.
All right, let's leave it there for now. That's investigative journalist Tony Gosling joining us via Skype from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, it's always great to have you with us here on Press TV.